Colt Single Action Army. Been around since 1873, manufactured on and off to this very day, continues to be popular. Let's chat a little bit, look at some of its features, find out why this may be a good or not so good handgun for you. Some new shooters, when seeing these guys at gun shows or their local gun shops, may not even understand how to handle them safely. Unlike modern revolvers, you don't have the same controls or the same control placement, so it may not be as obvious as to what you should look for. So we'll cover some of those aspects. Part one, we'll kind of discuss basic operations, and then part two, we'll do a complete field strip disassembly all the way down to the T. Show you guys the inner workings, what makes them tick, and what you could do yourself if things don't tick. You don't need to just run straight to a gunsmith or call Colt and get them to get them to fix it for you. If you know how to use a screwdriver, you'd be amazed what you can do with some of these firearms. So how do you tell if this guy is safe? The only real way to do it is to inspect all of the chambers in the cylinder. You do that via a loading gate on the side, but if you notice, the cylinder doesn't rotate. So you have to put it in a half-cock position, which is essentially 2 clicks of the hammer, 1, 2. That actually frees up the cylinder, allows it to rotate clockwise. Colts just about almost exclusively, to the best of my knowledge, rotate clockwise, and you would index each chamber and visually inspect that they're empty. When you have confirmed so, you still want to go ahead and pull the hammer to the full cock or 4-click position as if you were going to fire it, and then gracefully lower the hammer. The reason why you want to do that is because the firing pin is traditionally mounted right on the hammer, and if you fire that, the impact from the metal to the frame without the ability of a primer to take any of that vibration could potentially crack, stress, and over time will most likely crack your firing pin. So you want to go ahead, lower it gracefully, and anytime you actuate the hammer, even if you stop at the half-cock position, you want to bring it all the way back and then all the way forward to maintain good operating characteristics. If for some reason it's not empty, what you do is there's an ejector rod right here that sits directly below the barrel and its housing. It's spring-loaded, essentially lever that would eject the spent casings. You would index each cylinder, rotate it, and then each and every single time kind of actuate that rod, and it clears through the cylinder and then through the loading gate and essentially pushes the spent case out. On a kind of an empty round, it can just tilting the handguns enough, but when they fire, they'll obviously expand, and you're going to need a little extra support, so to speak. So these guns, the history behind them is paramount, and they've been around, I believe, originally issued in 1873 in a very similar 7.5-inch barrel and 45 long Colt configuration. This one's a 357 Magnum, just my kind of a more ammo availability in this case. But Colt's been making them on and off. They call them different generations: first generation, second, third. I believe they're on fourth or post-third. There's multiple names for what they go by. Still insanely popular, not just for cowboy action shooters, but in general. And we can talk a little bit about why. But before we do that, let's go ahead and further disassemble this guy if we wanted to. So let's say you actually want to remove the cylinder. Underneath the barrel is the base pin, and what you want to do, there's also a base pin and lever. You want to push that in and just simply pull on your base pin. If your base pin is unnecessarily stiff or loose, there is a problem with your, most likely your base pin spring, as this one has, and I'll show you in a later video exactly what we're going to do to fix that. And also, let's go ahead and remove the grips just to show you a little bit more about the operating mechanics of this firearm. Everything here is held together by flat screws, so if you're capable of using a screwdriver, that's really all you need to get this guy going. So here it is right here. You have a kind of a primary mainspring right here. When you actuate the hammer, that's what gives you the tension. When you depress the trigger, it rotates forward, goes bang. This is a single action only firearm. That means that the hammer only does one thing and one thing only. The trigger releases the hammer. If this was a double action firearm, for example, squeezing the trigger right now, there would be enough gears to actually cock the hammer for you and let it fall. In this case, everything is done manually. You bring the hammer, it rotates the cylinder, you fire, you do it again, over and over and over again until you're out of ammunition. There's less obviously features in that way, but the pros is a lot less parts and kind of greater reliability. So what you'll notice is you have a fixed barrel, right? It's this guy right here. Screwed underneath below that, this is a separate piece. They're not actually machined together. Is your ejector, kind of a housing rod and spring. You have your cast hardened frame right here. To the frame attaches your trigger guard assembly. Your I believe this is called your rear, maybe your rear guide. I'm thinking of that. Maybe your back strap right here. That's simply attached by a screw. There's a spring and a few internal parts and a hammer. There's a bolt right here. The bolt is what sticks out and actually catches on to the cylinder to keep it in place as you fire it. Very simple mechanics. Kind of a fixed front sight and a rear sight notch. These sights will not shoot loose or anything like that. They're very basic, but they're also very functional. In these firearms, you would actually load, even though the chambers are capable of holding 6 rounds, you would load 5 rounds. So this is also known as a 6-shooter, but you would load 5 rounds, and you would actually index it on the center round. So because if you notice, when the hammer rests in its relaxed position, it still actually sticks out. So if for whatever reason as you're carrying this, if somebody hit really hard on the hammer or some kind of vibration happened, there would be enough to set the round off. But by essentially carrying 6 rounds in the empty chamber sitting right there, it'd be impossible of that happening. When you would go ahead of fire, you would go ahead and pull the trigger anyways, which would index it to a live round, and you would still be good to go. So in that case, 5 rounds in a 6-shooter is the preferred way of carrying these guys. In that regards, it is an insanely safe firearm, because if you're resting on the empty chamber, there's absolutely nothing that can go on. When you're ready to fire, you pull the hammer back and you have a very nice single action. You have a fixed barrel, which gives you very, very good accuracy. At the same time, you're not forced to fit into an uncomfortable magazine or a grip. These are very small, generally very comfortable for a lot of folks. Like I said, you don't have a magazine sitting here, which is going to give you dimensions. So generally a smaller frame fits very nicely. They make these in different barrel lengths, I think down to 4.5, 4 3/4. So they're relatively concealable, kind of a low profile. And believe it or not a bad gun to this day to use for concealed carry. They're generally chambered in something insanely powerful, 357, 45 Colt, a stopping, kind of a big heavy hitting round. So firepower is excellent, reliability is excellent, safety is good. It's a good carry gun, and that's why they were so popular. Now there's more modern guns out there that give you more features, but these guys aren't too shabby on their own. You don't want to go any further for your standard kind of cleaning, inspection, and disassembly. We will in part 2, but this is simply how you operate it. Things to do, not do. That's how you remove the cylinder. Let's go ahead and kind of put them back. And that's also how you remove the grips, and that's all you really need to do for standard operations. So I open up the loading gate. There's a little bit of a finesse here. Get the cylinder back in there. It'll have to rotate a little bit until it lines up with the bolt. I go ahead and close it. I take the base pin, depress the lever here, put it in until you hear it click. Right, then you can check your indexing there. Now, one thing you do want to look at if you are getting ready to buy these guns, some manufacturers, they don't want you to dry fire it, or some dealers, they won't let you touch it. But if you're a serious buyer, you should be allowed to inspect it a little bit. Things that I would look for when buying these guns is, like I said, check to see how the base pin is coming out, too stiff, too loose. And then I would actually go ahead and load it up with some dummy rounds. And I would check each cylinder to make sure that it indexes properly. So I would go ahead and load up all 6. And what I would do is pull back, essentially, pull back on the hammer as if I was going to fire it, and make sure that it indexed. Then I would go ahead and fire it, pull back again, and make sure that each of the 4, 5, 6, make sure that every single chamber indexes. If it doesn't, just because one index doesn't mean they all will. That could be a timing issue. In this case, it was okay to dry fire it because I did put some snap caps, and there is a primer rubber area which absorbs the impact. Like I said, for kind of clearing these guys, same thing. Put in the half cock and just use your ejector rod. to get them out. You'll kind of develop a system on your own. So that's at a very high level how to operate and you know, look at the Colt single action army. So look for part 2. We're going to go ahead and actually take this guy down to all of its, I believe, 50 parts. Not too many parts in there, and appreciate some of the other beauty and aspects of it. So feel free to tune in for more videos on classic firearms such as these guys.